You know, you think that a leopard can change its spots, and it can't. It can't. Marxism, and quite honestly, intellectualism always ends the same way. When you put intellectuals in charge and they think they're better than everyone else. I mean, most people really don't recall the 5-year plan. In fact, in China, it's against the law to talk about the 5-year plan. You're not allowed to talk about it or teach about it. Most people don't know about it in China. And it started with Mao saying, hey, we're better than this. We're capable of anything. And we really need to change the way we do industry and the way we do agriculture. And so he had a plan that was supposed to last from 1958 to 1963, and it was called the Great Leap Forward. It was the Great Reset. We don't work as well, so we have to change things. And he had a plan for everything, from the way your family worked all the way up. And they were gonna change everything. Industry could prosper if the workforce was well fed. And while the agricultural workers needed industry to produce the modern tools needed for modernization, what he said was, all we have to do is we have to make our own steel so we can make our own tractors and trucks and everything else. And then if we make all this stuff, then we can give it to the farmers, and the farmers are going to just be able to make so much money. In fact, we're going to require them to grow so much food, and everybody's going to have a quota. And it was great. It was great. And the people gave up ownership. Mao had this idea that you would own nothing and you would be happy. And so they gave up ownership of everything, and it was owned by the state and by the communes. So everything in these communes was controlled, every bit of your life. You know, school, nurseries, health care. People moved into what was called the houses of happiness, so they could be looked after and taken care of by the state. All they had to do was just go to work. 700 million people had been placed in these communes by 1958. Here's the problem. Enthusiasm kind of stopped once they were in their house of happiness, because life was not as they said it would be. People owned nothing, but they weren't quite so happy. But they produced, and they produced and produced and produced, and they hit their steel quota. Propaganda was everywhere, including the fields. You could listen to political speeches as you were working. It was great, because politics, it was everything. Everybody in communes was urged not just to meet the set targets, but to beat them. And if you didn't have the machine, well, use your bare hands. Quality became a little dubious. The problem is the steel that they were making wasn't holding up. The tractors that they were putting together weren't working. And then they had a weather turn. Well, here's what happened. Things started to go wrong in 1959. Listen to this. Political decisions and beliefs took precedence over common sense. Now, I haven't heard that, have you? Have you heard any of this plan being discussed recently at all? Communes faced the task of doing things which they were incapable of achieving. Party officials would order the impossible, and commune leaders, who knew what their commune was capable of doing or not, could be charged with being a reactionary if they complained. Such a charge would lead them to be an outcast or be sent to prison. We're not having that problem, are we? Or are you seeing anybody that's becoming an outcast because they disagree with where the political leaders are taking us, saying that maybe this COVID thing is not a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't be handling it this way. Maybe your policies are leading to this inflation. Maybe we won't own nothing and be happy. Nobody's being made an outcast for those points of view, right? So here's the problem. Because they were trying to make steel, a lot of the farmers had to take work away from their fields. And so the fields weren't being harvested. And then they had problems with the steel that they were making to help the farmers. And then the weather went bad. What could possibly go wrong? Well, here's what went wrong. The first year, 9 million people in China starved to death. 9 million people. Mao's attitude was, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. It'll get better. 20 million people died in China, starved to death before 1962. 20 million. They say that is a very low number. It's more likely that it was around 40 million people died. But we don't know because, it's China. These communist countries, these countries that are set up where the elites have all of the power, and they do that because they care so much about you, the little person. They care, and they know what's right for you. These countries that are set up like this always end up like China and what's happening in Shanghai right now, because they don't know better than you. They can't make decisions for your family. Do you think people would stay in their home after they know what they know about COVID? This is not the first run with COVID. Do you really think that they would stay at home, be locked inside? And do you think with what they know now and what we know now about COVID, do you think it would be worse than the possibility of one city? One. There are multiple cities locked down. This is just Shanghai. This is the financial capital now of China. This is our New York City, except New York City has 7 million people. They have 25 or 26 million people. Do you think if those people were allowed to leave and the truckers were allowed to deliver things, do you think there would be starvation? Do you think it would be a possible revolution? Because that's what they're headed for. And the only way to stop it, and this is why they're being so brutal, the only way to stop it is to kill people. And they have no problem killing them. Food would not have been rotting. Central planning never works. And we have so lost our willingness to learn from the past. We're just trying to erase the past, which is strange because that's exactly what happened in China. Scholars now say in China that, this is when they could talk in China. People who lived through it are now discovering the true history of the Great Famine. And they're now putting it together saying, wait, the government knew about this. They were the ones responsible for this. Those people who actually have seen the history in China now know what the problem is, and they know what the problem is with this COVID shutdown too. It's the same problem, and it will end most likely the same way. And most likely we will hear about some of the dead and some of the devastation, but not all of it. Here's a big difference, however. In 1962, China didn't affect us. China didn't affect the rest of the world. What they did with their citizens, I guess, was their business. This shutdown is already causing problems here in America. Remember, this is like January. Remember, we didn't really start to feel the effects until when? July? This is like January when we were first watching it and they were shutting down the city. And it wasn't Shanghai. And they were shutting everything down. We saw the effects within a couple of months. We're going to see the effects of this over here on what you can buy, what you can't buy, what you have access to, repair parts, chips, computers, everything. I mean, if that's what motivates you, you should look at it in a financial way. This is going to cripple the global economy. I just personally hope we get the message that we are going to have problems so we don't have to worry about food when the time comes. Please plant a garden. If you live near farmers, if you don't have a farmer's market, start one. If you do, start getting to know the farmers. You're going to need the farmers. Please be in a community where you all kind of think alike because you don't want to be alone. You don't want to be surrounded in a city full of the people like Mao had. You want to be surrounded by God-fearing people who know the Judeo-Christian ethic of do unto others. Love thy neighbor.